7:05. The meeting is being recorded, and I'd like to bring the Concord Fincom meeting into order. And so I'm going to take a roll call vote. Chris Reynolds, I'm present. John Hickling.
Present.
Parashar Patel.
Present.
Lois Wassoff.
Present.
Dean Banfield.
Present.
Amrith Kumar.
Present.
Eric Dahlberg.
Present.
Kathy Kukalo. I think I got everybody. Okay, so we are here. The first order of, I'm sorry, is anybody talking? The first item on the agenda is minutes. So we had minutes from February 11th, 2021, the regular meeting. So we're catching up on minutes, and I think, anyway, so are there any comments on that set of minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Okay. Are we ready for a vote? I think so. I'll take a vote. Chris Reynolds, I vote yes. John Hickling,
Yes.
Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Amrith Kumar.
Am I allowed to vote? I wasn't there.
You are allowed to vote.
Sadly, you are, but that seems odd, but
You are
you
allowed
are.
to vote, even though you're not there. Okay, good. Eric Dahlberg.
I'm in the same boat. I'll vote yes, but I wasn't present.
Okay. Kathy Kukalo.
Yes.
Okay. I see that Greg Garello has joined.
Hey,
Greg, we're just voting on approving the minutes from February 11th.
Am I up?
You are
Yeah.
up.
I approve.
Okay, great. So we have unanimous approval on the minutes. Excellent. Okay, the second item, Carrie, maybe you want to introduce this one, the budget adjustment?
Sure, good evening. The item before you this evening is a request from the Regional Housing Service Office to make an adjustment to their fiscal 22 budget. And this is a request that you have seen before. This is a revolving fund that does require a town meeting vote to set the budget, but there is a process that is found in Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E1/2, which allows for a budget adjustment outside of town meeting with the approval of the Finance Committee and the Select Board. And here this evening is Liz Rust, who Executive Director of the Regional Housing Service Office, to present the request.
Yes, good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm just the plain old director, but I appreciate the introduction. Yes, you've seen this request. This would be the third year in a row, I think. We set budgets with all of our member communities. Maybe you're familiar with the Regional Housing Services Office. It's an intermunicipal regional collaboration with 9 communities, organized through an intermunicipal agreement. We set the budget with those communities on an annual basis. We invoice them in July. They pay in their funds into the revolving fund. And then through the year, maybe unplanned work comes up. This year, it's happened very quickly that unplanned work has come forward. And so here are, I think there's a memo in your packet. So the request was was to increase by $50,000. It was a spending limit of $325,000 at the annual town meeting. And this is a request to increase it to $375,000. We have put out invoices and received payments for $25,000 of additional services. So that's really just half of that. And we're expecting additional pieces coming up in the balance of the year. These funds are they're fully offset by fees collected from the other towns. So there's no actual, money impact to Concord in any way.
Okay, good. Any questions about the memo or the request? Amrith.
Yeah, last year you said we'd approved similar things in previous years.
Mhm.
At the end of the year, was there anything left in the fund or did you expend all of the monies which was appropriated?
So the budget had a small amount of carryover funds, like $2,000 or $3,000. So that was all spent out.
And what is HPP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, housing production plan.
Okay,
So
thank you.
that's a, yeah. Mhm.
And I think Parashar has a question.
Yeah, it was, I was a little confused, or maybe you can explain. From reading the memo, the town meeting set a spending limit of 325, which included about $11,000 in headroom. And you say you've already surpassed that and issued invoices to member communities for a total of 25,200. I'm curious, how can you spend more than you were authorized to spend in the budget? If I read that memo correctly, is that kind of what happened?
So we haven't really spent it yet. So we've sent out invoices that would be for the fees coming in. So we have received in more fees, but we have not actually increased the expenses. The next step would be, once this is authorized, would be to increase purchase orders, on the expense side of the budget. So
Invoices to member communities, is that the town of Concord and
yes,
others?
exactly. Yes. So the town of Concord invoices the other communities to receive in funds. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then just one other quick question. You're asking for 25,000 because you're anticipating contractors, but also hiring an additional head? Is that kind of what's
We're
happening?
asking for $50,000
Yep.
of an increased spending, and the budget did include an additional contractor coming in. Yes.
Okay,
already.
so that was already budgeted. So next
Yeah,
year.
So that was just that paragraph is really just a explanation of, how many hours could you expand, and to a certain extent, we're constrained by how many hours people actually work. So we have a little ability to work more this year because we have additional person joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Greg.
So if I'm also reading this right, it says just increasing the budget for the 50 grand. That's not asking for another 50, right? It's just increasing the capability.
There's no money being asked for
Right,
here.
there's no money being exchanged here whatsoever. Right.
That's
Just wanted to
correct.
clarify that for everybody.
That's correct.
Okay, good. I don't see any other questions.
Sorry, maybe if I may, Chris,
go
just
ahead.
one last
Yeah.
thing. In accounting terms, when something occurs a number of times, it ceases to be non-recurring and extraordinary. And I'm just wondering if there's something at the beginning of the process we should be doing, if there's any commonality in these additional requests that can be anticipated in the original numbers or not. But that may be something for next year.
Sure, Carrie and I will work on that when setting the limit for this next fiscal year.
Good. Sounds good. We need to approve this, so we need a vote. So,
I'll make a motion to approve.
okay. And what's the motion?
I make a motion that we approve the request for increased funds according to the letter from Ms. Rust.
Okay,
Second,
all right. Any other discussion? All right, I'll take a vote. Chris Reynolds, I say yes. John Hickling,
yes.
Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Amrith Kumar,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Kathy Kukalo,
Yes.
Greg Goriello,
Yes.
Mary Hartman.
I'll abstain, Chris, I just got here.
Okay, Dee, I didn't see you before.
I just got on
Okay.
also. I'll
Okay, all right,
abstain.
then yeah, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have a quorum for yes. So, okay, it passes. So that's great. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you very much for your time and
Okay,
your support.
sure. Okay. Our next item is Chair's comments. So I have a couple things to go through. I'll try and be quick. So, I just wanted to take you through some things that Fincom's been involved in the past couple of weeks. So there was a training session on November 6th that I attended. It was run by the town clerk and the town moderator. Generally, they covered good meeting practices. What are the responsibilities around agenda, minutes, notification, open meeting law. The moderator gave a refresher on annual town meeting process, the warrant, the hearings, the actual meeting itself. So it was a good refresher. If anyone's interested, I know some of you did attend, but you could always go online to YouTube and watch that if you'd like. One other commercial I'm going to make here in connection with that is compliance. So we have requirements around some affidavits that you make around independence, around conflict. There's some training that we need to do on open meeting law. So there are some things that we have to do on an annual basis as members of Fincom. So back in the summer, I had contacted Carrie to see where we were. There were a couple of open items on a number of folks on the committee. I had tried to have her, if we were going to have in-person meetings, I was going to have the clerk come and attend the meeting so we could actually take care of those things in person. We haven't met in person, so I haven't been able to do that. So I would encourage you to check in with the town clerk's office and see if there's anything you owe as a committee member, and take care of it to the extent that you owe something. That would be my commercial for today. Okay. The second
I will
item.
I will definitely do that, Christine, but haven't they in the past notified us when something was required?
They do when it's on an annual requirement, they do, but when I asked for it, there's, you have to be sworn in. So we have, with COVID, some people haven't been sworn in. And there are these requirements. So they send you the link that says, take this training. Not everybody takes it. Or if they actually, you have to prove that you've taken it. You have to print off something and send it in. So we may be mostly compliant, but they may not have evidence of it. So if you guys can check that out, that would be helpful. Okay. I'm going to move on to the letter that we discussed at the November 4th meeting with respect to the capital plan and our recommendations on how do we manage the debt. And so that letter is going to be discussed at the third capital planning meeting. So that's on December 6th. So that if you remember how this worked, there are 3 meetings. The first one is the select board and the school committee. The second one is Fincom. That was the meeting that we had where we discussed the letter. And then the third meeting is another meeting with the select board and the school committee, and that's the final meeting. So they'll be looking at the feedback that we gave them at that meeting. In addition, however, so I've had a conversation with Terry Ackerman of the select board, and we've agreed upon some action steps with respect to those recommendations. So the select board is going to discuss the reserve with the Board of Assessors, and that topic is going to be on this coming Monday's agenda for the select board. So there's going to be a discussion there. It'll be the first discussion, but the discussion is going to start. I agreed that we would pursue a warrant with respect to free cash. So to the extent that we believe free cash is needed to fund the debt stabilization reserve, Fincom will put that warrant article forward. On the debt term and the call options, so Carrie, I don't want to speak for you, but Terry and I assumed that that's a staff discussion. So that's something that you would take as a to do?
Yes.
Okay. And on the.
I'm sorry, Chris, which one is that again? Can you go back just a minute?
Yeah.
Which one was that?
The debt term and call option. So.
Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I got it. Go ahead.
So the main things we had were around the stabilization reserve and the debt terms.
Yep.
So the stabilization reserve, we're going to take it. The component of that's related to, hey, could we fund it from the assessor's overlay surplus? Select board is going to pursue that conversation. And the debt component piece is this town staff is going to pursue that. Okay.
Thank you.
The other topic that Terry and I talked about was, for those of you who may remember, back in September, there was a session that the select board ran with, they called it a brainstorming session, where groups from all over town were asked to come with ideas around how we might reduce the cost of the middle school building or perhaps create revenue that could offset the cost. So there was a series of ideas that came from that. I think there were maybe 15 or so ideas. And Terry has now sent out a note to the folks who were assigned those follow-ups to come back to her and I by December 10th. So we should have feedback on whether there is in fact opportunity for other cost reductions or cost offsets or revenue opportunities. Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Terry in the Q&A has alerted us that the Board of Assessors today voted at 4 today to release $1 million.
Yay.
Oh, she did?
Whoa.
Where's
So
that?
it's in the Q&A that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Wow. Well, that's good news.
So there's your live stream update, okay?
Wow. Wow, look at that. Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Board of Assessors. That's very good news.
And Christine, she is also the only attendee. I don't know if you, your call if you wanted to
Good.
bring her in
Chris,
to talk
if
about
Terry
it.
would like to be promoted, then obviously she can be promoted, whatever she'd like. That's great news.
I say promote her because I would like to thank both of you for
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
forgetting
Yes.
this issue, for
Okay.
bringing this issue up and scheduling follow-up to it, because
There
I think
she
it's an
is.
important issue.
Yeah, it is.
Great.
We'll wait
So
for Terry to
mechanically,
come in.
how is that going to work? It goes to, does it have to be approved by town meeting?
It's a good question, so maybe.
Yes.
We can talk
Yes, it
about
does.
that. Yes,
Yes.
it probably does, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Terry. Boy, you work fast.
The order was also there.
Yeah,
Oh, great.
at the Board of Assessors meeting today, they did approve it. However, they have, here's the wording, if I get the right sheet. I had a hard time getting on this call tonight.
Yeah, a few people have said that, Dee. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so they made a motion. And the motion is to release $1 million to the middle school stabilization fund contingent upon overlay account being funded for years 23 to 25. And then in May, they will reassess after the end of the abatement season. So there was, during the discussion, there was some back and forth about, do we really have $1 million that we can allocate? Or I should say, release. And so they decided that they did that. Carrie was also at that meeting and indicated that as it comes to town meeting, if in fact they need more abatement money for the coming year than what they anticipate, then they may have to remove some of that $1 million, but they don't anticipate that at this time. And when they finish the abatement process, which is in May, they will reassess to see if they can contribute more.
Yeah, well, the town meeting is May 1st.
Right.
So
they do not finish, they only said May is the end of the abatement time. So if they don't get funds in, and Carrie, please correct me if I don't have this exactly correct, but if they don't see in the stream of money that they're receiving, that they are going to be able to cover the abatement that they are going to be giving, and they also keep within, I don't know, over 3% in that account that they have, then they may have to reduce the $1 million, but they don't anticipate that at this time. And they have the town assessor, and Carrie, please tell me what his last name is, because I looked it up and all I knew from the meeting was his first name is Rick.
So we have an interim assessor and his name
Right.
is Rich Scanlon.
mm-hmm.
Rich Scanlon.
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
Carrie, what's your take, Carrie, on what we need to do?
There's nothing for the finance committee to do. The board of assessors voted And as somebody said, this will need to be approved by town meeting.
Okay.
Is going to happen until town meeting. And there'll be a warrant article to transfer this money into the stabilization fund.
Okay.
When you say this money, is the amount million confirmed or is the amount also TBD at this point?
No, they voted to release $1 million.
But are they gonna have all these conditions on it? Because if it gets voted at town meeting and then they have to claw it back, I don't know how that
But
works.
this seems-
Oh,
but
no, I don't.
Okay, just hold on, one person at a time. I'm asking Carrie a question.
No, they voted to release the $1 million, and they did make it contingent upon the town continuing to fund the overlay account going forward, because they felt that it was easier
Yep.
to, keep it in the budget to make sure that it's funded each year, but that they would look at it and they would potentially release additional funds. Probably not in time for this annual town meeting, because they are going through their abatement cycle, which doesn't really close out until closer to the end of the fiscal year. So what they will have available for this town meeting is $1 million. And maybe soon after this town meeting, they'll be able to make a commitment to another release of overlay. But the timing is, it doesn't line up perfect with our town meeting cycle, but
Good.
Okay, good.
Good.
Okay, Dean has his hand up. Dean.
Carrie answered one of my questions, which was whether or not this anticipates us continuing to fund it at the $500,000 that we have been doing. So that's answered. However, one of the things that we can still consider is that town meeting this year will occur after the election vote for the override. So we will know going into town meeting whether or not the school is a go. Okay. I think it might be prudent for us to consider digging a little bit into our levy limit capacity and just nudging the tax rate up a little in order to get some of the funds that we're looking to get. I mean, we're looking under all the couch cushions for money so that the tax rate does not have to rise. But as we look at the way the taxes are going to peak, it would be gentler on the taxpayer to start the process early and then ramp that up gradually. And in those early years, when we aren't really building the building, the first year at least, when we're not building the building at all, that money just could be banked. So it's just a thought that we might consider an article or something where we literally just say, we're going to add this much to your tax bill in order to fund the stabilization and reduce the spikiness of this. It's just a thought.
Yep. Mary.
Just quickly, one mechanism we could do rather than a separate warrant article would be to simply reduce the $1 million that we bring back every year down to 500,000. So there's no additional warrant article. It's just we've made an internal decision here that instead of taking $1 million out of free cash like we usually do, we're only going to take half or something less. So that might be a simpler mechanism to do exactly what you.
Doesn't all that do is leaves the money in free cash. In other words, we have to make some action that'll put the money that we would otherwise put in the budget to reduce taxes into the stabilization fund. Otherwise, it would sit in free cash, Mary, I think.
Sorry, my phone is. Say that again. I'm sorry.
I believe that if we don't budget
Yep.
the $1 million to reduce the tax rate,
Yep.
what would happen is the money would just literally just sit in free cash, not move to the stabilization.
That's
fund.
right.
So
That's
we
right.
still
And then
need some kind of article or something.
Right,
to
which
move
we
it
are.
over.
You're right. And what I think what Chris said earlier is, yes, we are going to
We are.
start an article, and that 500K or whatever the amount is
Could go in
becomes
there.
part of that.
Of
Yeah.
that.
So it's a
Okay.
shift. It's just a shift.
Right. So,
Right.
so this is a little bit of a waterfall, right? So the first question was, is there money that could be released from the overlay surplus?
Yep.
Sounds like the answer is yes. We know that the gap that we have is about $3 million. So that's $1 million of it. So then the question will come to us, what else do you want to do in this year? You have a couple more years to go. Do you want to, add another $500,000 or $1 million? Let's figure it out. But that's a question for us. We'll have to wrangle with.
Right.
Parashar.
So if I understand the previous discussion correctly, for us to make sure that money goes to the stabilization fund, the town would have to specify that in the budget that they come to us with in December, correct?
No,
No,
no.
it's outside guidelines. So we can,
Okay.
there can be an article outside of it. Yeah.
It's a
Okay,
whole-
but so fair enough, but it's outside guidelines, but my question is on timing. Should we button down what we're recommending and what the town will actually do before the override vote? Because I think.
We'll have
taxpayers should
to,
be-
because the warrant, actually take that back. We have longer for that warrant. Yes, I think before the hearing, we sort of want to know what our game plan is, frankly, because I
And when
think
is the override vote again? It's in January?
January, yeah.
Right, so.
So
I
in
think we-
December.
I think the
No,
vote is in February, I believe, the actual
Okay.
election at the polls.
The election is, right, that the special town meeting is in January
Right.
1st, the 20th or something, yeah.
Yeah, so before the special town meeting, I would think we'd want to present, we or whoever's responsible, presumably would want to show the taxpayers and the residents exactly what the 3 million gap is, how we're planning to close it, so they've got all the information, right?
Right, that's what I think we want to do at the hearing,
Okay.
is we want to have a discussion of exactly that, Parashar.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody else with their hand up. Okay, so Terry, do you have anything to add to that discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay, okay, good. All right, so we will be having further conversations around this, but this is a very good first step. I'm very, sorry, Amrith, I didn't see your hand.
The transfer to stabilization, can that happen at the special, or is that going to wait till the annual?
No, we're going to wait to the annual. The warrant is closed on the special, so there's no articles else going on the special right now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, all right, let's go to the next update is just on Envision Concord. So we had a very good turnout at Envision Concord, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. A lot of you folks were there. I thought it was a good session. I thought it was particularly good because it facilitated accountability, right? So people agreed to something several years ago when Envision Concord was developed, and this was a chance to check in and see how we're doing. So it looks like the select board was pleased with the progress. They had about 30% of the items that were on there that were completed. And I think the message coming back from the session was also a good one. And it was around collaboration, right? And trying to think about, are there things, because if you read Envision Concord, which I did, a lot of it has to do with trying to take what they called a systems approach to planning in the town. And it's integrated approach. So when it's something that I think we, particularly a group like Fincom, who ends up getting the results of a lot of committees' work that have financial impact coming to us, and then having to sort of deal with articles and so forth. It's an approach that at the outset involves all the different parties. So it's meant to, there's actually a questionnaire that they had developed 3 years ago that said, hey, if you're considering a big project, these are the questions you should be asking. And one of them is, how will this be funded? So at the time, there was an approach put forward. I won't say that I've seen it used a lot in Concord in my time on Fincom, but I do think it was good to remind us that desire was in Envision Concord, and the select board and Terry, I think stressed at that meeting that all committees in town, including Fincom, should think about how are we collaborating with others in town? And is there something else we need to do from a collaboration standpoint to make sure that we are taking things with a kind of a system-wide approach when we take up issues? And I thought that was a good message. So if you have any thoughts on that, you can send me a note. I know for me, when we talked about the topics this year that we were covering, the one that was at the top of my list was affordable housing. And the intention there was to do exactly that, right? Rather than sitting back when the article comes and having FinCom say yes or no, but to have a dialogue earlier with the parties involved in affordable housing to have a better understanding of what they were after and have them understand what some of our concerns are around affordable housing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the Observer reports. But you may have other ideas where perhaps we can do a better job on collaboration in the town, and I'm happy to hear that. So if you do, send me a note, we can talk about it. Okay, the calendar update I'm going to hold until after middle school update, which is going to come next. So some late breaking news on the middle school. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So a little bit of background. So our concern around middle school is related to costs and how the town will pay for it. So for a long time, the goal on the budget has been 100 million. So we started out with a range of 80 to 100. And then as the costs started to get tallied, I think both the select board and the school committee and FinCom sent a strong message around staying at the top of that range, which is 100 million. Since then, the numbers have actually gone out. So there's a process where the middle school building committee sends out the design that they developed to 2 estimators, and those folks come back with costs, 2 independent parties. Those costs came back about 2 weeks ago, and the number was 102.5 million. So very close to the 100 million, but above it. At the same time, the project manager comes up with what they call value engineering, which are opportunities to bring the costs down or up. In one case, they actually had an item that they thought they could increase cost. And they gave that list to the middle school building committee. And for the past couple of weeks, they've been going through that list to see which of those items they would like to accept or reject in adjusting project scope to therefore adjust cost. And so they finished their dialogue today. Last week, there was a need to actually print the warrant. So for purposes of printing the warrant, the number was, I think,
1037.
right? 1037, I'm sorry, 1037 was the number that went into the warrant. Today, they concluded at 1027. So there could be other opportunities for savings, and I'll take you through a little bit of that, but they got to 1027. So I'm going to share my screen if I can here. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is this is late breaking. This was this morning. So I took notes quickly. I hope I've got it right. Dean, you can check me here and see if I've got it right. But just to walk you through what the components are. So the building construction costs are 80.8 million, and that includes the majority, as you might expect, of what goes on. So site prep, the old building, demo, materials and labor for a new building. It includes escalation. So these estimators went off and looked at, they got bids for, or based on their experience, went out and figured out what costs were today. The actual bids for this work won't be going out for another 18 months. So they also built in some escalation. So they were putting inflation into their number, and that number is 80.8. On top of that, you add what they call soft costs. So architecture and engineering, administration, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So this is anything that isn't, bolted down in the building. That brings your subtotal to 95.9. And then typically, so in a standard new build, the experts there tell us that a 5% contingency is built. So 5% of the 95.9 is 4.8 million. So that's added in. And on top of that, the building committee had some concerns given the given what's going on with respect to inflation these days, particularly affecting building costs, they had some concerns that the inflation factor that was used by the estimators could in fact come in higher. And so they added about just $2 million on top of it. And I put the 2 million on top of the 80.8 because that's really what it's meant to address. It's really construction related. And they called it a bid contingency. So that's meant in case when they actually go out to bid in 18 months, if the costs come in higher, that's a reserve or cost that they could use to offset cost growth. That brings the total to the 1027. So that's where they are. That's the vote that they had this morning. John.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for this. I had asked this question, Dean. I don't know if you ever saw my email or maybe didn't have the information at the time to respond, but my question, and I thought Dean might be the one to know the answer, was that a year or so ago, I think the estimate for construction cost inflation was about 8%. And with the mixing and matching and calling it escalation and calling it bid contingency and other things, I kind of like to get a like for like number on what we think the construction cost inflation is going to be. And my concern is that if it was 8% a year or two ago with the general inflation rate at 1 to 2%, my concern is what is it now with the general inflation rate being somewhere from 5 to 6%. So I don't know if there's a like for like number or whether we can assess this, but that would be helpful to me. I hope that's not an unreasonable
Let me
question.
give you my best answer on that. The Hill International, who is our OPM, the owner's project manager. Sorry about my dogs making a noise. The owner's project manager was carrying an escalation number of about 8 to 9%. And when the schedule for the, I can't do anything about my dogs, I'm sorry. Close this door. That's not going to help. When the schedule for the town vote moved from something that they had anticipated being in December all the way out to February, they added those months to the schedule. And when they added those months to the schedule, they used the 8 to 9% escalation that they were carrying. When this bid reconciliation occurred, they are now using an escalation number of 5 1/4. So it is a much smaller number than they had been carrying, but that's in there. That's what's in these reconciled estimates, to my knowledge. So
So Dean, that's in the 80.8?
That's in the 80.8, but also in the 80.8, there is a 10% contingency buffer to just build the building. This extra 5% that you have is on top of that. So there's the 80.8 contains escalation of 5 1/4. It also has a 10% contingency buffer for unanticipated things. They have hazmat to worry about in demolishing the other building. There's a lot of moving pieces that who knows what could go sideways. So there's a good size contingency component built into building the building, and that construction element at 80 million includes all the site work and the demolition of the other building. So that does have a 10% contingency built in. And then you have this 5% that's on the screen that Chris has here. So there's a fair amount of contingency. And then the bid contingency, which is this extra 2.5% or 2 million that the committee and the select board suggested ought to be added. My understanding of that is after the bid is accepted, any of that that's not consumed evaporates. It's not available anymore to the project. It's just gone. So it's literally just an insurance policy that when the bid comes in, we can cover the bid. That's all. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Dean. That's good information, but still, I'd kind of like to know what the like for like comparison is to the 8 to 9% construction cost increase that we talked about a year and two ago. It sounds
Yeah.
like there's a 10% and a 5% and a 2.5%, which adds up to 17.5%.
John, those are project management contingency buffers. Those are not escalation. Escalation is carried as a completely separate line item so that as you drift the schedule, you just increase the price by whatever, which they just did. They had to drift the schedule a couple of months because the vote moved from December scheduled out to February by the vote of the committee. And when those 2 months were added, that added, some number of hundreds of thousands of dollars based on an 8 to 9% escalation, which is different. That's time-based.
Escalation or
Time-based.
construction cost?
Is project-driven. It's like what happened in the project that you didn't expect.
So that's apples to oranges. And sorry, Dean, but I just would like to know what the like for like construction cost estimate that was 8 to 9% is now. It's a pretty simple question.
But John, just so you understand, the way they did this today, they got today's costs. So the 8 to 9 is going to be from, 2 years ago, right? So it's not going to be like to like, right? It's going to be today's escalation. So today's costs with an escalation to 18 months when the bids are actually sent out. So it won't be like to like, but we can certainly tell you it's 8, and I think it's 5.25 is the answer.
I believe that's what it is now.
That's what it is.
now
It's
at
8 to 9 to 5.25 now. Because time has passed and they've actually built in actual cost growth into the base. Does that make sense to you?
If they've built costs into the base already, then it might make sense to have a lower construction cost increase going forward.
Right.
But
that's
it
what
doesn't
happened.
kind of make common sense in the current environment where the cost of virtually everything, including labor and energy and materials and everything else, has gone up so dramatically.
And that's why the 2.5 bid contingency is on the bottom. That was the conclusion of the group, right? So the top number is prepared by these outside experts, these estimators. So that included today's costs plus an escalator for the next 18 months, which they said was 5.25% or thereabout. On the building committee and the select board concluded that's not enough. That's what the 2 million is at the bottom.
If I could share my screen for a second, I might
So
be
that
able
would
to
get
show you
just-
slide
sorry,
that.
Dean, just 1 second. If you took the 5.25 plus the 2.5%, John, then you're close up to your number.
Yeah, and there was a 10% number, I think, included in the 80.8 construction cost. So I guess we add all those up and that's the answer.
I don't know about the 10%. I'm not sure about that one. I think that's not an escalator. That's more contingency.
If I could share my screen, Chris, I have
Sure.
a slide that was prepared by Hill International that shows how some of this stuff has progressed and how some of these things are built up. It may not
Okay.
be
Let
that
me,
instructive.
Let me take mine down. Okay.
Okay, so what you see here is how the construction cost has progressed going forward. And it starts bottom line, the 80 that Chris was just talking about is shown on the bottom line as total construction. And it started way back in like May or March of 20, I'm sorry, this first column is not dated, but I believe that goes as far back as March. And it's 79.9. And then that has moved up and the estimate has moved up to 81.2. And then it moved back down to 82.94. And then when they moved the vote out by 2 months, they have a cost escalation update, which literally moved it from an 82.94 to 89.96. So that was about a $670,000 change just because they drifted the schedule by 2 months. So that was a big deal. But all the sub elements of how you get to that 80 million that Chris showed as the first line are everything above, that whole column. And you can see that they carry something that they call design contingency. And when Hill was doing this, they were using 12%. When they did the reconciled estimating, they knocked that contingency down to 10. So Hill had been carrying 12 as contingency, and Hill had been carrying 8 or 9% for time-based escalation. The more you drift, the more that's going to cost you. That's time escalation, 8 to 9, and that's now 5.25. So that's where those numbers are when you're trying to figure out where's this 80 million coming from. This is the more detailed view of that was done before the reconciliation was done. So
Okay, good.
is that
Thank
at
you.
all helpful? It's the best I can offer you to just tell you where the numbers come from.
That's good. Okay. Thank you, Dean. Amrith?
Knock that back
you can,
down.
You can stop sharing if you
Yep.
want to, Dean, so I can
Yep.
see the crowd here. Thank you. Amrith. Now you're on mute.
Sorry, Dean, you mentioned a number of 10%. Which of these lines is that? Because I see a line which says 12%, a line which says 8% or 9%. Which one's the 10% line? And
Okay,
that
the 12%, we just need to understand two things. Contingency is unanticipated project things that happen inside the project that you didn't plan for. Something went haywire. There's more earth to be moved. There's blasting that is required. Something happens that you didn't plan for. You have a buffer in the project planning called contingency to hopefully cover over any of those things that come up that were not anticipated. That's contingency. Escalation is based on the fact that we're making a guess based on today's costs to do something. What's it going to cost us in the future? What's the cost of money? What's the cost of labor and everything else going to be when we get to the point where we're actually doing it? And that's escalation. So this project plan had been carrying 8 to 9% escalation, time-based increases in the project cost, and 12% for unanticipated, a buffer for unanticipated activity contingency. Those have both been knocked down in the reconciled plan to 10% for unanticipated costs that are based on, they're for contingency, and only 5.25 now for escalation from here till the building is actually built. So those two numbers have been reduced in the reconciled estimates.
Okay.
Is that
Okay.
helpful?
Yeah, I think it answered much of my question. I think reconciling them would mean to add another column, which includes the numbers which Christine had on her slide, because this
Okay,
slide.
these are at two different points in time.
They're
so
two
that's why
different-
they're
That's
two
the
different.
reason.
We're not
That's
trying
the
to
time.
reconcile. Okay,
And the slide I just showed really is just the subtotals of everything that adds up to Chris's first line, which is 80 million.
Got it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
okay, good.
Okay.
Mary,
Thanks, Chris. I have a quick question. So you said that the article is actually at 103.7 million. And
yes,
this morning they voted the 102.7.
right.
Does that mean that if that's the number they're going to actually bring to the special town meeting? Or
Good
could that-
question. So they still have another, the moderator told them they have until the hearing if they'd like to bring it down, not to bring it up. So I
Okay.
think they're going to stick at the 102.7. There are a few things that are moving. So if you went through that list of value engineering items that they were provided, that they were going through to cut the cost and change the scope, they had a couple of things that they cannot resolve yet. So there were things around acoustical fencing, which they have to have an acoustical test done. That's not going to be done before town meeting. There was a question about a fire pump. So there were a few pieces. And there's a question about soil and where topsoil can be stored. So they took, I think, some conservative estimates on items that they could cut. I think to the extent that they know more, perhaps they would come with a still lower number.
Okay.
I doubt it. I think they're going to stick at the 102.7.
Thank you.
So Parashar.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if we can simply ask the committee for a table that basically is updated based on what Dean showed. Can they just add another column with the latest numbers? And then I think we would get a clean comparison to see how the numbers have changed.
We
It can be done. I could probably do it myself. There's
Yeah, we
other
can-
documents that they've provided.
So
Hold on. Yeah,
I
we
think it
can.
would, can we just ask them? I
One-
mean, they're the folks and just
Well-
get the numbers straight from them.
Okay, so that's a good point. That's a good segue into kind of my next question. So I just wanted to tell you, this is where they are. So on the 16th, there's going to be a hearing. So there'll be a presentation by the building committee. That hearing is run jointly by the select board and by Fincom. So we'll be able to ask more questions at that hearing. And after that hearing, there's a regular Fincom. And at that meeting, we would vote on the article. And that's going to be the number, right? So the article's going to, the number's going to be in there. It's going to be for the bonding. And what I'm interested from the committee is, what are you guys going to need to vote yes or no on supporting the article, right? So we've had an observer. We've been talking about this project for 2 years at Fincom, and Dean has been our observer. So he's provided us with information. We also have met with the building committee. They've also offered to come back again to meet with us if we want to have a discussion, or we can wait to the hearing. And so the presentation for the hearing is in planning now. So on Monday, there's a meeting on that I'll attend where we'll talk about what is it that group is going to present. But for me, so if I'll start it and you guys can, join in and tell me. So for me, I'm interested in understanding some of the answers to the questions that we put out there around how much stabilization reserve can we put up? What will the term of the debt and the ability to have a call option do to the impact to the taxpayer? And what are these other savings ideas could there be? So in my mind, I'm trying to understand, is it going to be 1027 or is it something less than that? And if it is 1027, what's the impact on taxpayers, particularly in 26, 27, and 28, those peak years? So those are the questions I'm sort of seeking information before we vote on the 16th. So let me open it up. Mary.
So you want to know now, Chris, what our questions would be? That's what you're
I
asking?
want to know I want to
Okay.
know how we're going to get
Okay.
to an answer. And if
Yeah.
we need to have other information brought to us, we don't have a
Yeah.
lot of time. We're going to have to make sure we get it. So, yeah.
Okay, the thing I would like to know is what's happening with the solar, because we know that the solar is not included in this 102.7, at least that was my understanding.
That's
So
right.
how's that going to be funded, and what are the savings we expect to see from that? So that would be something, both in the cost and the savings. And then the other thing is are there any other expenses?
Can I just ask a question on that, Mary? So
Yeah.
since it's not in the number,
Yeah.
why is that critical to your decision on the number?
Because I want to know if there's going to be a supplemental article later on. What I'm worried,
Okay,
but
but yeah, assuming
Go ahead.
they're,
so you
I
don't
don't
think.
know they're
Go
going to
ahead.
answer that one, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I guess I would like to understand more about the funding for the solar and I guess any other things that would be coming down later on that we would have to fund as a separate article. Are there playing fields? I don't
Is there
even
anything
know.
that's excluded?
Is there
Yeah.
anything that's excluded that we're going to see later on? That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you. Parashar.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Christine. From my perspective, what's the overall cost estimate look like? What's the financing mechanism? Where's the gap and how do we smooth out those 3 or 4 years we've talked about?
Yeah.
I would like to see, for my own benefit, as I said, an updated table. And because we've had a lot of discussion over the last 18 months of costs going this way, costs going that way. Have they properly accounted for cost inflation? So just their latest estimate of how the costs have changed. That one table that Dean showed would be perfect. And no offense, Dean, but I would like the numbers to come from them so that
Right,
they
that's
can
fine.
basically say, you know
Yeah.
what, these are the numbers we came up with.
I'm sure
Yep.
we can do that. Okay, good. Lois.
Yeah, I agree with your concerns, Chris, and I'd like to give the town a little homework And I'd like to know that we have gotten some expert advice on what's achievable. Instead of
You mean
guessing
on the financing, Lois?
on the financing, what's permitted by the law, what's achievable in a municipal bond context. I'd like to know that we have some real guidance about that, so that because I think that's critical. For myself, I'm interested in the details and in the cost cutting. I don't know that we're going to make much headway there at this stage in the process. I think our focus should be on how we're going to pay off this debt and what the pros and the cons are of some of the various approaches that we've kicked around. I think we did a very nice, I thought your communication with the select board, the letter you wrote was great.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that the ideas that we've been kicking around have actually been vetted by the experts in the field, so we know what's realistic and what's achievable. So that's what I'd like to be educated on before we have to make a decision.
Excellent. Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. My recollection is the last time we checked with our advisor at Hilltop, the addition of a call feature had de minimis impact, to the cost of funding. So that's probably something Carrie could check pretty easily, whether the market conditions have changed. But at the time, I remember that, the market for AAA, municipal paper, the impact of adding a call option was negligible. So Carrie has come back on, so maybe she has information on that, but maybe that's something for the future.
Yeah, I know that's something that's on her list. I don't know that she has any information for us tonight. I don't think you do, Carrie, do you?
I did get an initial response, but I wanted to follow up
Okay.
on that because I wasn't satisfied with the response.
Okay, well, we'll let you do your legwork. Anybody else have something else they're looking for in order to vote? I think that's a pretty good list. So, so the town has the to-do on the debt item. Terry has put out the to-dos to the folks on other cost savings. So if there's something else coming down the pike that we could put against that cost, we'll know it as opposed to tax dollars, or we'll have a better idea of it. We'll get an updated table, so we'll work on that. Does anyone have a need? I don't think we need it, but obviously it's up to the committee. If you wanted me to schedule to have the building committee to come back in and talk to us, but I think we have all the information from them that we need at this point. So I think that's not a good use of their time or ours at this point. The solar funding, Mary, I know, let me see what I can do on that one. I know that's a question that the school committee has as well.
Okay.
And it's been discussed several times at the meetings. I know CMLP is working on it. I just don't know the timing. So let me find out if anybody, I think they're going to know that before the hearing or not. Let me see what I can find out there. And the other things included is an excellent question. So I think we should get from them in writing. I'm going to ask for an updated table, and I'm going to ask specifically for that question about what else could come in as a cost, whether it's fields. We know solar, it's solar ready. Is there anything else that they anticipate is going to come that we haven't thought about that's going to hit on the tax bill that's outside of this request that they're making?
Some of the experience from the high school might help.
Yes, well, I
Anticipate.
think they've thought about that. I think they've
Anticipate,
thought
yeah.
about it. Dee.
Yeah, and in a much earlier conversation, they said none of the landscaping at all is being factored into this cost. So it's not just fields, like playing fields, it's also the entire landscaping. So that would be a cost into the future.
Good.
The other thing I'd be
How could they not put that in?
I don't know. I haven't
Who
heard that.
knows?
We'll
But
ask.
the other thing I'd be interested in is they will be making a presentation, and if we can get a copy ahead of the time,
Yeah.
ahead of the meeting of the hearing,
Yes,
so that we can review it.
yes. Yeah. I think, again, this is really, it's their tryout, right, for town meeting. So the content of that material, I think it's actually a really good question. So there's probably going to be, there could be two different presentations, right? So there could be a presentation by the building committee of here's the building, right? So they're talking to the town about here's the building and here's what it's going to cost. I would be an advocate for at some point in that presentation or separately for FinCom to put up a slide that says, and here's what we think it costs you, right? So that there's both sides of the discussion at that meeting. So there's actually a meeting next week, so I haven't yet had this dialogue with anybody, but that's one of the conversations we're going to have. What is the content of the presentation? So what do we think the right content of the presentation is? So Dee, getting theirs in advance may be useful, may not, but I'll obviously ask for that. It's just a function of what's actually the content. You may have already seen it already, if it's pictures of the building and so forth. Ray.
Yeah, is the value of the Sanborn School afterwards as a sale or as a rental income or whatever, is that part of this picture or not?
Not yet.
Okay.
That idea was discussed back in September and given, well, I don't think it's not given up completely, but in terms of sort of, is there an immediate number we can kind of score? The answer was no, not yet. So it's still on the list, but it hasn't yet made it to, yeah, that's a good idea. We're going to take it forward. It requires, there's a lot of questions, I guess, about whether we'd be able, whether no one wants to count it in the column yet, I guess is the fairest way to say it, but it's still out there.
So it's not even reasonable to ask for a range of values for that?
No, I wouldn't say at this point, no.
But don't say that no one would like to count it in the column, Chris, because I would like to count it in the column.
I know you would like to
So
count it in the
one
column.
So one person would like to count it.
Okay, everybody wants to count it in the column. It's a question of whether we go to a meeting and say it's in the column, and I think you can't yet. Dean.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Just a point on your comment, Chris, which is the meeting will have, some nice displays of here's the building you're going to get. This is what we've been working towards. Here are all the features. Here's how wonderful this is going to be. And then here's what it's going to cost. And here's what it might cost you, the taxpayer. That has been a feature of all the presentations that the schools or the building committee have done already, but they have Jared doing that calculation, and it sometimes is rosy. Maybe we should have an agreed upon number or something that we're in consultation with how that's presented, rather than just having the school committee or the building committee go off and, come up with their own number that we haven't been consulted on. That would probably be
absolutely right. That's not going to happen, Dean. Not on this one.
Okay.
That is not going to happen. Okay,
right.
Kathy.
I'm trying to follow the sequence of events, so I apologize if I missed something.
Sure.
But my question is, the ideas that were put forward as potential ways to offset costs or generate revenue, which were assigned out.
Yes.
Right. Are those going to come back before the presentation?
Yes. They're due on the 10th of December.
Okay, and the presentation is?
16th.
Ooh, okay. So they got a few days to slot them in.
Yep, that's right.
And is solar in that, or has that been taken out as a town project with the municipal light?
I'm going to say it's out because CMLP has agreed. They're in the process of looking at how they would be the ones who would pay, do the infrastructure on top of the buildings. So I don't remember the exact list, Kathy. It may or may not be in there. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know.
All right.
Okay, good discussion. And that will bring me to another item for us. So Mary, we had a to-do coming out of that.
We did?
meeting. So, yeah, we
What
did.
is it?
So we
Oh.
did it. We did it.
We did it. Well, we
You
did
did
it, but we didn't.
We
We
did it.
Yeah.
So there was a to-do with, we talked about it at our, I think, a couple of weeks ago, FinCom meeting, that FinCom and the school committee would agree upon the method by which we would realize the consolidated building savings. So we voted on that, and Mary took that to the school committee. I think that was last week.
Yep.
They listened to it. They did not respond yet. I think they've told us that they want to come at a future meeting. They want to consider it. If I recall how it went, Mary. You can.
They didn't know the deadline to go back to the select board, but now that we have that deadline, which is December 6th, then I think the school committee would be more likely to take a vote.
It's December 10th, yeah.
Oh, December 10th.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, yeah, so we expect that they'll react to that. In the meantime, so we did move forward on one of our to-dos there.
And
so
there seemed to be agreement.
There
They
seemed to
just
be
didn't-
agreement.
They didn't take a formal vote.
The question, so you and I will, maybe we'll have to talk to Cynthia and figure out how do we, I understand their issue, right? So they had a question about how do they do this, because it really relates to a period of time in the future.
Mhm.
And I know, I think, anyway, we're going to make sure, I guess they can try and figure out how to get there, because we'd really like to make sure we can count those savings at some
Right.
point, so. Okay, let me see here in my notes, I think, so let me make sure I covered everything. So we actually haven't yet figured out, and this is important, I know, Lois, this is a question that you asked me, is whether we continue in Zoom. So one of the questions I have asked is whether this hearing, which is on December 16th, is going to be hybrid or Zoom. So there's a discussion, there's actually a call tomorrow that I'm going to be on. We're going to talk about that. So this is a very important item, right? A lot of people have interest in it. So we're going to figure out what's the best way to actually run this hearing. So I'll come back to you on what the folks think, but we have a few folks talking about that tomorrow.
I would propose we have it on the football field at the high school.
I'll bring that up, Karsh.
There you go.
I'll see how that
Exactly,
goes.
maybe in the
At
stands.
7 o'clock, in December. I don't know how that'll go over.
They've done it yesterday.
Yeah, right. Dean, you had a question, which I have an answer on. So just so you know, folks know, just like for a special town meeting, there's a Fincom report. It's a very limited report. So you know what our regular report looks like. There'll be a report from Fincom. It'll be probably a page or two or so long. It'll be a short one. And Dean and Lois are on point for that. So they have the timeline worked out. The expectation is that they would come or when we make the vote, right? So we would, that report is due to go to the printer on December, let's say we'd have to be done by December 31 with the content of the report. It goes to the printer on January 1st. So what we vote that night will be noted in that report. And then if we can, before we print it, we'll also include in there what the vote is of the select board. So Terry mentioned to me that she thinks the vote for the select board will probably be towards the end of December, maybe around the 20th, Dean. That's when they think they'll take their
Okay.
vote. So
Fine.
it'll be enough time for us to get it into the report.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Christine,
good.
one,
Yes.
before we move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
On the school where you had a list to find out whether the number is the total number or not, would you add a line item to your question?
Yeah.
Specifically, does that number include all of the setup for electronics, like networking and equipment related to that? Because that is sometimes not included in these prices and that comes in later.
Okay. I will add it.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Let's see here if I get all that. Yep, I think that's it. Okay, so that's the middle school update. And now I want to go to the calendar, just again to make sure everybody knows where we are on the calendar. So Carrie, is it possible for you to share that calendar on your screen? Is that possible? I just have a couple of points I want to make sure people are aware of.
I can share it if Carrie's not
Yeah,
able.
if someone can just put it up, that would be great. Thank you.
Should be coming up.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Amrit. Okay, so we're at the end of the second block. That's where we are today. And then you'll see there's quite a few meetings coming up in December. So I just want to make sure everybody knows what we're off to go do here. So we have a number of guidelines meetings. So we have a guidelines meeting on the 2nd, and we have 2 bodies. So we have the town's response to preliminary guidelines, and we also have a new party who you haven't seen before, and that's the Minuteman Regional High School. So we only meet with them once this year. So they'll be bringing in their response to our information requests, which is similar to the letters we send out to the other 2 bodies, the Concord schools and the town. So you've got.
Is it possible to increase the font on this?
Sure.
I'm having difficulty seeing it.
Sorry, yeah.
Oops. Okay.
Not so much. I'll
Is
do
that
it.
good? Yeah, that's better. Yeah. Does that
Thank
work,
you.
Kathy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So that's the 2nd, that's December 2nd meeting. Okay, then a week later, we have the schools coming in. And then on Wednesday, the 15th, which is the night before the hearing, we're actually going to do our final guidelines recommendations. So the guidelines subcommittee is going to vote final guidelines recommendations on that Wednesday. It's not a Thursday, it's a Wednesday. So please make sure you add that to your calendar. Then the next night, we have the hearing. Following the hearing, we will have so we'll close the hearing, and FinCom will have a regular meeting. We will, at that point, vote the final guidelines. So they'll be submitted to us by the subcommittee, which is essentially us, but you know the process that we go through. So we'll actually vote our final guidelines, but we'll also vote on special town meeting warrant article, which is the middle school. So we'll have 2 votes on the 16th. Okay. And then on Friday, we actually, on the 21st, we issue the guidelines. I don't know if we're going to need a meeting on the 23rd. If we can avoid it, I will. I'm just keeping it there in case something comes up in this busy month that we need to meet on, but I'm hoping we don't meet on the 23rd. In January, so I'm just gonna touch on December and January. We only have 1 regular meeting, but we do have the special town meeting on the 20th. So that's a Thursday. You need to attend. So FinCom needs to be there. There could be amendments on the floor. I need a quorum so we can vote if we need to on the floor of that meeting. Hopefully we don't, but you need to show up to that one. And I think that's all on the calendar that I wanted to make sure I point out. And as I said, if that hearing ends up to be in person on the 16th, so those of you who are traveling or whatever, just put that in your, I guess it would be hybrid either way. The question for us though, if I need voting, I have to figure out how that would work. So I'll come back to you if I know if it's somehow it's going to be hybrid, what that means for us. So I'll come back to you with a note or something that I don't know yet. Good. Any
Sorry,
questions?
Chris, do we have
Yeah.
a time yet for that special town meeting on January 20th? Do we know what time that will be?
I don't
7
know off
p.m.
the top of my head. Is it 7
7 p.m. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Okay, good. Any questions on the calendar?
And Chris, do we know,
Who will-
that
who-
is
who
the
will be-
special town meeting in person?
I'm sorry, Lois?
Is the special town meeting in person?
Yes, it is, I believe, right?
Do
Terry,
we
am I
know?
right on that? I believe it is.
Who will be sending out, will we be getting something from Kerry for these dates, like the location or the Zoom information or in the time?
Yes.
Okay, because, yeah. It is difficult to know where we're going.
Well,
All
right,
right.
right now, everything is Zoom, right? So, but if they're the special town meeting, I think we know the location of that. So we'll make sure we add it. So Carrie, we can add that to the calendar.
Christine Perry has her hand up.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Chris, the special town meeting, all town meetings by law have to be in person. There are no Zoom provision or hybrid for a town meeting. So it's going to be at the high school.
Good.
Um, And the reason for the public hearing on the 16th of December is to get as many questions answered as we can so we can have a short in-person town meeting in the winter during COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Terry. Dee, your hand is up. Are you answered now, or you still have a
No, I
question?
do have a question. In the past, I don't think we ever saw any response prior to the meeting when the Minuteman came. And I'm wondering if they could send, I don't know if we had anything in the letter going out to them about submitting their material ahead of time, but if we could get anything ahead of time from them, it would be helpful.
Parashar, did we ask for that?
We did.
Okay. Can you maybe give them a jingle and see if we can get something earlier, what they think? Okay, good. All right, so that's calendar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go to observer reports, which we haven't done in quite a while, which is good. I can just start quickly. So on the select board, I've pretty much given you what's been going on there. There was one other thing I watched. They had, the select board had invited the rep Tammy Gavea in to talk about the home rule petitions. And the town has a number of home rule petitions. The ones that we're most interested in, the ones with respect to affordable housing, apparently were put forward in the state Senate, and Tammy was responsible for the other ones. So in her update, although there was discussion of the items, there wasn't a lot of new information on the status of those home rule petitions, other than they had been submitted and continue to be resubmitted. But that there wasn't much new news there, I would say. That was it for me on the select board. So I want to stick to our concept of the topics. So the one I want to go to next is affordable housing. And I attended, and I know Ray did as well, the roundtable that they had a couple weeks ago, I think. I can't remember anymore. It might have been a week ago. And that's where all the different groups got together. And I also had a conversation with Keith Bergman. So Keith is the chair of the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust.
Affordable Housing Trust. Right.
Yeah, right, the trust. So just to introduce myself and go through kind of what some of the history has been with Fincom on this topic and what some of our questions are. He watched the meeting that we had where we had a discussion on affordable housing, which I thought was great. So we had a good dialogue. What Keith asked for and is for them to sort of get ahead. So it's his intention to have discussions about criteria and a lot of the questions we had at his committee. And so I said, okay, great, go do it. And we'll catch up with you when you've got more to talk about. So that was how we moved that conversation forward. It was a good conversation. And I think that he understood what our questions were. And at that roundtable, he brought some of that up, and he talked about how they're going to be looking to create, I think the phrase that he uses in his committee is guidelines. And so they want to come up with their guidelines for how the town will make decisions on opportunities with respect to affordable housing. Tied to that, in Envision Concord, there was, if you went back a couple of years, not surprisingly, you would see in that report that housing was one of the ideas that was floated. And there was I think that the term that was used is more diversity of housing, which includes affordable housing within that. And one of the first steps was related to having a goal around establishing targets, which to me is one of the most important steps. What does success look like? What are we after? That goal has not yet progressed. One of the steps that the group wants to do in connection with that is to have this updated housing. I'm going to get the title wrong. Ray, help me out. What is it? Housing production plan, I think is what it's called. So that the last one was from 2015, and the new one is going to be updated, or was to be updated this year, There have been some issues with delays in information from the census, so I think there's going to be a dialogue between the planning office in town and the select board about what's the next step. So it's a question, I don't know yet how much progress they're going to make on some aspects of this, if they're waiting for that production plan, but I'll shut up and I'll let Ray. How did I do, Ray? Are there anything else we want to talk about on affordable housing?
Yeah, the roundtable was excellent. It was in addition to Keith from the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. Rick Eifer from the Concord Housing Association spoke, and just I guess the issue was the Giroux property. They want to build a building there, but the cost estimates are $700,000, which is painfully high from the town's point of view for a residence. And Mary Hartman asked a good question: is that a single family or a two family? But I think
It's a single family.
I don't know
Is
the
it
answer.
single? Is it
I
single?
do. It's
I
a
think it's
single
a single.
family. Yep, it's
Yeah.
a single family.
And so the select board thought that was just too much money, and I personally would agree. And there's some ways to get around that if we don't have to do prevailing wage and that sort of thing. So there are some options that are being looked at as a way to bring that down. And I guess they need another $240,000 to do that, and they don't have a real answer to where that's going to come from. There's a property on Upland Road, sort of corner of Old Marlboro and Upland Road, that they're looking at for both affordable housing and for open space purposes. And they've asked the community CPC for funds for that, and CPC is, I believe, is committed to putting some funds from both affordable housing and open space into that, but specifics are not yet available.
Do you
Yeah,
know, this might not be a fair question for you, Ray, I'm just curious. So I think the select board voted to, or got, gave the one of these housing agencies an agreement, go ahead and pursue it. Has the town bought anything? I just
No.
trying to figure that out.
No, I don't think so. I mean, talking
Okay.
about Upland Road.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
because
I don't think so.
it's in private hands, right? So it's
Right,
something
yes,
we would
owned
have
by
to
the
acquire.
Giovanni's, and they've given, now there was some mention about a agreement to hold off a year before they go to market. Give the town a year to, get their funding or their
Okay,
commitments together and so on. So
okay, I didn't understand that. Thank you. Yeah.
it's imminent, but not, crisis mode yet.
Okay.
And Rick Feely did talk about the transfer fee and where that is. That's just being moved through the legislature, and apparently there are 75 statewide organizations that are supporting it. I mean, Mass General Hospital is one. They're supporting that they're supporting affordable housing just as a way to, have housing for employees. Let's see. Yeah, and you already covered the housing production plan. That's pretty much what the roundtable covered.
Good update. Thank you.
I did attend the meeting of the CHDC, but that was sort of they're following the Upland Road property, and they have, no, that's pretty much it.
Okay,
They're
good,
following both of those.
Good update. Thank you, Ray. Capital spending. So Eric, I don't know if there's anything else going on yet. Obviously, we looked at the plan, so we know what we have at least a longer term view of the large projects, but I don't know if we know of anything else that's going to come our way article wise with respect to CapEx. Any ideas on that, Eric?
I haven't seen any new news on that. I think
Okay.
the committee's pretty much up to date, given our previous meeting and the letter you sent over.
Okay, all right. Anybody else hear anything on CapEx that we haven't talked about? I haven't. Okay, I guess, actually, Greg and Mary, on the enterprise units like broadband. So I know, Mary, you were at a meeting tonight on broadband, and I
Yeah, I
think
was.
prior to, yeah, I should tell Carrie, I think I told you that, Mary's taken over for Greg on broadband, right? You knew that?
Yes.
Yeah, so between Greg and Mary, anything on that group? What's going on there?
Well, they're working on recommendations that they'll bring to the select board and the town manager, and any capital, in the context of capital spending, any capital spending that they want recommended would go through CMLP, through the enterprise fund. And so far, from our conversations, they're still very committed to the enterprise fund model.
Do they have any numbers yet?
No,
No, okay.
Mary, thank you for taking that.
not a problem.
Okay. Mary, anything on economic vitality we need to know?
Not really. I mean, they haven't really met much lately. And when Jennifer Schulman at the Envision Concord gave an update, she pretty much said that they were focused on keeping the retail establishments alive during the pandemic and doing a lot of work of getting out the shop local. And I think they did a good job. They are meeting in December. And my big question for them is, are they going to be active when it comes to the development of like the StarMet property? Are they going to go beyond just retail in the villages and really work on broader economic development? So I'll ask them that. I'm trying to figure out who's the point person or who's the point committee besides the select board when it comes to StarMet.
Okay.
So to be determined.
All right. So that's our topic stuff. Is there anybody else observing other committees that have come across something that they think this committee needs to know about? Yeah, Mary.
I wish Peggy was here because the CPC is really active right now.
Yeah.
As far as
Who is active?
Peggy, CPC. And I know that Amherst has been going to their hearings. And Amherst, when is the hearing that they're having with, is it November 30th? November 30th. So, yeah. So, Amherst, if you, I wish she was here to give us an update on what they
she's
are
not here
first.
tonight.
How much money is available and all that. I think the money, Carrie, I think they've got 1.8 million available this year.
Yeah, if you give me a minute, I can open up what I just sent them, because we just found out yesterday that the fiscal 22 match from the state was about 90,000 higher than expected. So it's terrific news.
1.8 was the number they mentioned at their meeting.
Yeah, that sounds right. And the match this year is like 39%. So remember, the match from the state was going down,
right?
And now it's come up to 30. So that's good news. But again, this is when they have to kind of filter out all of the requests that they have and get into that $1.8 million number. And the hearings are November 30th.
So what hearing are they running?
They run a hearing with, I think, the people who are asking for money. Well, actually, Dee would probably know better what the hearing is about.
The hearing takes place over generally 3 meetings or so.
Yeah, the people come in, right?
Excuse me?
The applicants come in and present.
The applicants come in and they make their presentations. And that takes place over about three meetings. They're not really hearings. Then there will be, gosh, I was just looking at the calendar to see when, if the hearing is on here, but it's not. They will come before our committee.
Yeah.
But that won't be until probably sometime, in December?
No, in their meeting, they said that they'd be coming to Fincom.
Oh, it'll be later.
Yeah, that's much later. That's in March.
It'll be later. Yeah, I have a.
Yeah, that's why I didn't know what they're doing on the 30th.
They're just having.
I think the big one, the big one is with the property on the upland comment
That's right.
area.
And that's what the hearing's on? Okay.
They want $1 million on that.
Yeah, that's a
property.
big one. Yep. Yeah.
That's the one that Ray talked about, right? And that is November 30th.
And
That's
they're trying
November
to
30th,
figure,
okay.
they're trying to figure out what portion of it is open space versus
Yeah,
affordable housing.
right.
And I think it should be an interesting conversation, because at the last meeting that I viewed, there were a lot of people who live in the area who are opposed to it or had very big concerns about it.
Yeah,
So that should be an interesting one. And the applicants, which was the planning board, they said that they needed all the money. They needed the $1 million.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how that fleshes out over time.
yep. Okay, good update. Lois,
Yeah, I don't have a full observer's report on the planning board. I spent some time trying to catch up on minutes and hearings, but I just want to put a pin in something. The planning board is very actively looking at the Thoreau Business District development and very actively, and they are, I believe, intending to bring a warrant article for town meeting in 2022. I may ask to switch my observer assignment. I had raised this with Chris. I live 2 blocks from Crosby's, and whatever decisions are made there are going to have a direct impact on me. And I might want to be freed from my role as the Finance Committee observer to be able to react to what's going on.
mhm,
I may actually feel that I have a conflict, and I certainly don't want to confuse my concerns as a citizen with my role on the Finance Committee. So
okay.
it might be prudent for me to step away from being the observer for the planning board.
Okay,
Lois, is it okay, Chris? Can Lois just give us a snapshot of what they're thinking of doing
No,
there?
I can't, because I'm not up to date on it completely. I
Okay.
can all I can tell you is that they are very focused on that property and on that business district and on development that would involve multi-use, including mixed-use retail and residential, and really reusing the property that is now the Crosby's property. I don't know, there's going to be, I believe they have a public hearing scheduled for December 14th. I don't know if that will have an impact on their timeframe. So I can't help you out on the substance of it right now, Kathy.
Kathy, what they're focused on are zoning changes that would allow and
Anything
encourage,
they do now, right, that's their
that would
focus.
allow and encourage multi-use development on the
That's my
properties
understanding.
in that area.
That
The
was
one thing I think is important is it's still up to the business owners to decide to actually do something. So if,
Oh, it's not, I'm not saying that there will be, that something's gonna happen there.
no, I understand. I'm just clarifying it for Kathy, that's all.
Yeah, it's not that something's gonna happen there in the next 6 months or year. But this
Okay,
process is they are very much focused on getting their piece of it defined, which is, as Parashar said, primarily zoning, and zoning that would potentially really make changes in the use of
Yeah.
that parcel.
yeah, I think, I think I may have said this before when we talked about economic, revitalization and vitalization, we all want the town to have good opportunities to raise revenue, but at the same time, personally, I like the town the way it is, and I'm not anxious to see more building up of taking away of our historic nature and trees. I get so.
Well, I mean, without getting into the substance of it, what some of this does involve the Thoreau Street frontage. And a lot of the focus is on that big parcel that now has Crosby's, and it's a strip mall, it's a paved strip mall with only one entrance and one egress, so on a busy road. So,
all right, so Lois, you and I will talk about the
that,
observer assignment, and we'll figure out a
the
way.
general concern is that the the report from the planning board in my current role as an observer is that we should be aware that that's something that we'll be probably seeing some action on. I don't know how
Yep.
definitively.
Yeah.
Or for town meeting of 2022.
Yep. Okay, good. Dean.
A quick comment, and that is that the town had an active developer who ultimately ended up building the Concord Market, but they had numerous plans on the drawing board that were mixed use in that space, where there would be residents above what might have been a set of retail shops. And instead, what we ended up with was the Concord Market. But, you know, that kind of thing has been contemplated before. I don't know whether they made any progress with the planning board because that would have taken some kind of change of zoning for them to do that, I believe, in that space. And they ended up just building Concord Market instead. But they went very far down the road of drawing up plans to have a mixed use development that involved residential above retail shops in that same shopping center on that side on Lowell Road. So could happen at Crosby's.
It could be. Mary.
I would just like to understand the intersection between what they're proposing at Thoreau versus what the planning board is doing around allowing denser housing for affordable housing. Because when we look at it costs $700,000 for one unit at the Giroux, we need to find a way to have denser housing so we can build affordable housing that's affordable to build. So, and I don't know, we've been asking the planning board for what can they do to help us as far as changing zoning bylaws or zoning guidelines, I guess, in certain areas of town. And I'm wondering, is this one of their trial balloons or is this a whole separate thing? I don't understand the intersection between those two. So that would, whoever becomes that, I'd like to get a better feel for that, because I'd like to see progress on allowing denser housing so that we can in fact, have affordable housing that we can.
Well, if there's going to be, here's a suggestion. So if there's going to be a warrant article, which I heard them say as well in the Envision Concord discussion, Lois, so I think I heard that as well, then we would have an opportunity. Again, we don't typically, deal with zoning articles. However, if we wanted to have someone from planning in to talk to us about it as we get through guidelines, that might be a good time sometime, maybe in the January meeting. So why don't I take that and think about how we might have a better discussion on that. Have some more information. Okay, good. Kathy, you still have your hand up. You still have a question or are you all set?
No, I was just going to observer report as I've been doing the schools, and I think all of us talk. There's a great overlap between the finance committee and the schools. The school committees meet often. They have lots and lots of things to talk about. The middle school is probably on the agenda just about every meeting. Updates, the same updates that we get. So I don't have anything new. I just wanted you to know that I am following along. The last meeting, they did talk about Mary's request and the fact that they were going to fulfill the request in terms of working on the consolidation costs. So
good, great, thank you. Okay, so that's all we had for our regularly scheduled programming this evening. So we did pretty good. But yes, Emery?
Before you wrap up, the thing which Ray was talking about and Mary touched upon, I was told I should probably mention it at this meeting. I live down the street from the upland property in question. So there was a question of whether I could submit a letter to CPC about it and whether I could continue to be on the Fincom. So I called the State Ethics Commission and they said, there's no conflict of interest unless I'm getting any money, but I should disclose it to the committee and specifically to you, which I did.
Yes.
I asked them whether I need to mention affiliation to Fincom in any letter I submit, and they said it's not required unless you participate in the meeting, in which case you should mention it, which I did. So I just want to let all of you know that I'm down the street from that property. I have no financial interest in it. I don't intend to recuse myself from any votes related to it. And if you want to know what happened at the CPC meeting or what the neighbors think about it, I'm happy to talk to you about it offline. But since I was advised to mention it at a meeting of FinCom, I'm doing that.
Okay, and Amrith, I'm gonna take a look at that, and I may talk to you about that. Greg?
Thanks.
Just as I'm in the same boat there, Amrith, I would also file the form and register it with the town to note that you're disclosing this, so that if anybody doesn't know that's joined this, my wife leads the middle school building committee. So you'll see me blank out sometimes during the middle school discussions. Also file with the town. That way you're totally clear.
I'll send a note down.
And Dean, Christine, and everybody also, they were the chairs at the time, so I forwarded that letter to them as well.
So, one other thing, Amrith, that's helpful is when you write letters on your own personal behalf, it's always nice to have a little disclaimer line at the bottom, like as a PS, that says, I am a member of the FinCom. However, this is my opinion. It is not representative of either the FinCom, any other group, or any other individual. You're just trying to, make it explicit that the letter you're writing is on your own behalf and doesn't have anything to do with what we do. That was advice I received from a call that I made at some time in the past to the Ethics Commission, and that's something that they recommended that I do. So it's just, I'm just passing that along.
Fair point. The question I asked them was, do I need to disclose my affiliation? And like any good lawyer, they answered exactly my question. I should have asked them, should I do anything else? And they'd have said, probably put it at the bottom saying, this is your own opinion. But I asked the question, they gave me an answer.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I will do what you said, though.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will.
It's good
chat with
practice,
you.
that's all.
Okay, all right. So any other business, or are we ready to adjourn? Dee?
Yep, I just wanted to remind people again that on Monday night, the Board of Assessors will be presenting to the Select Board, and it's called a classification hearing. It's just the terminology they use. But if you want to know anything about what the assessors do and what the town looks like financially, I would suggest that you watch this meeting. I had a preview of it today, and it's either going to be, and Terry's not here, I don't think anymore, but it's either going to be at 7:10 or it's going to be, I thought it was Terry Ackerman I was thinking of, not Carrie. And
She's there.
oh, okay. Oh, there she is. Okay. It's either going to be at 7:10 or 7:40, but check the agenda, and that should, and it should be very interesting. I think you'll be very well informed about what they do at that meeting.
So they're presenting to whom?
So the Select Board.
The Select Board. So this is the Select Board meeting. Thank you.
It's a Select Board meeting. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
It's the annual tax classification hearing.
Okay, they didn't have tax in the agenda today, so the tax just, okay.
Okay.
It's actually very interesting information.
Yeah, I remember looking at the output of it last year. It was interesting,
Yeah.
and it helps us understand more about how, what we actually, the estimates that we make for taxes, how they actually play out in the next year. It goes
How
through.
they arrive at a
Yeah.
mill rate is really where the where the rubber meets the road.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It's a good thing
Yeah.
to watch if you're on FinCom. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Oh, I
All
can
right.
tell you what the tax rate is going to be. The uniform tax rate that they're presenting is $14.76 per thousand.
That's the proposal. Okay, good.
Yep.
I think Parashar, you had your hand up.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, we will take a roll call vote. I'm Chris Reynolds. I say yes. Greg Gariello,
Yes.
Mary Hartman,
Yes.
Dean Banfield,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Parashar Patel,
Yes.
Amrith Kumar,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
Kathy Kukalo,
Yes.
Ray Andrews,
Yes.
John Hickling.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody, and we will see you on the 2nd for a guidelines meeting.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
You-
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Gobble, gobble.